20 years of experience in life science industry, both in pharma and academia, as well as 10 years of experience in marketing, predominantly in the precision medicine sector. She's currently in charge of life science research and omics and synthetic biology business for the US, Canada, and Latin America sections at Sciex. Previously, she was responsible for the global growth strategy for the metabolomics business at the company. Outside of her work responsibilities, she serves as a change agent for the diversity and inclusion team at Sciex, supporting women in science. And more recently, she has supported new mothers returning to work, allowing them to implement a work-life balance. She also serves on the metabolomics working group for ABRF and participates in the metabolomics QA and QC consortium. And she was recently appointed to the board of directors for the International Metabolomics Society, where she serves as the treasurer. So today she's going to be speaking about a topic that I am very interested in, and it's the journey to discovering your worth as a female scientist in the field. So Dr. Ubhi, it's yours.
Okay, thank you, Kiati, for the introduction. Hopefully you can all hear me really well. So thank you, first of all, for inviting me to giving a talk today. And as Kiati said, the title of the talk is The Journey to Discovering Your Worth. And as Kiati mentioned, I work for Sciex, but I'm doing this more as a way of just giving back to the scientific community, and how can we learn more about ourselves. So a bit about myself. I'm British by birth, but I'm of Indian origin. I speak multiple languages, native English speaker, and I've worked and lived across Europe and in many different countries, and I moved to the United States in 2014 with my husband. As Kiati pointed out, I serve on a number of different scientific organizations, and I'm involved in community-driven scientific organizations as well. And I'll talk briefly a bit more about why those are important to me and my worth, and what I've got out of them, and what vice versa, what does the community get out of it from me. I also serve as a mentor at Sciex, as Kiati mentioned, and I'll talk about later. I serve as a D&I change agent at Sciex. I feel that diversity inclusion is very important in an organization. And I launched a mother's mentorship program last year at Sciex that allows women to come back to work after their maternity leave, and allows them to have a career and have a family at the same time. We live in supposedly sunny Colorado, but it is snowing right now outside, with my husband and our 3-year-old son, who you can see here in the picture on the right. And recently, our newest addition to the family, our 4-week-old daughter, who's in the bottom right-hand corner there, making her first debut on PowerPoint. So she's downstairs with my husband, and I have an hour off to give this talk. And we love being outdoors. We're very outdoorsy type people. We enjoy hiking. We love to wine taste. I'm a huge, I'm very passionate about cooking. So that's where you'll find me most of the time, in my house, in the kitchen, and trying new flavors. And we love to travel, at least pre-pandemic, we love to travel. So we're hoping that now vaccinations are rolling out, we get to, get back to some type of normality. A little bit about my work experience, as was just presented. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years in the life sciences industry, and it's been mainly in the field of precision medicine and biomarkers of disease. I've got over 15 years experience in metabolomics, and my career has really spanned the pharmaceutical industry, academia, and more recently, or the last 10 years, working for a mass spec vendor. And the last 10 years, I've really combined science with marketing. So the last 10 years, I've actually gained a lot of marketing expertise, and that's where I've chosen to pursue my career. And I'll talk about how I got there, what challenges I had, what hurdles I faced, and how I overcame them. And I've held roles not just as a scientist at the bench, but I've held roles in both business, in strategy, in product management, and also now I'm in the commercial team at Sciex. And my work has taken me all over the world. I think in the first 2 years of being at Sciex, I traveled over 20 countries, which was amazing if you're able to travel so much and don't have many ties. And so that has been a great, great experience to learn how to do business and science in other cultures. And so I think really what the take-home message here is that you don't just have to be a scientist at the bench. If you want to expand and broaden your horizons beyond the bench, that there are avenues to do that. And so when Kiati approached me to talk about this specific topic, I sat back and I really had to think about what worth and self-worth meant to me. And this is my perspective, and it could mean very different things to you who are on the call today. And really what I started to think about was, what are my values and what do I stand for? What are my desires, my aspirations, and am I able to articulate them confidently enough, whether it's in my career, my work, or my personal life? It also means accepting my weaknesses, or at least knowing what my weaknesses are and then being able to accept them. Nobody is perfect, so it's not that you have to be this all-round individual, but you can learn to work on some of those weaknesses, but everybody has them. Okay, so it's about accepting them and figuring out how you work around them, and also how do you leverage your strengths, right, in a positive way. And then I started thinking about, well, what for me, worth is more than monetary value. It also is about expanding my horizons beyond my training, my expertise, my core competencies. Like, what can I do that really pushes my boundaries, pushes my buttons, and challenges me? But at the end of the day, self-worth and worth to me actually ultimately means being happy with who I am, accepting who I am, where I am, and where I'm going. And in the early parts of my, and I'm going to talk about my career path today, and I'm going to touch on some personal life experiences as well that helped shape that career path. But ultimately, I did early on in my career really hit a wall with respect to where I wanted to go with my career. What did I want to do? And that wasn't very clear to me. And it took several years for me to talk to people and work with mentors to really try and understand what that looked like and that future path looked like. So over the next sort of 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, I'm sort of going to dig in where I started and some of the challenges and barriers that I faced and how I overcame them. And tying it back to, what it fundamentally meant to my self-worth, like I just pointed out on the last slide. So I graduated from university with a master's in chemistry, and I went out and got my first job. I was so enthusiastic about getting out into the world of work that I just wanted to go out and get a job. Any job was fine. At the time, GlaxoSmithKline, which is a large pharmaceutical company, was looking for, their biomarker group was looking for a research scientist. I had no idea what metabolomics was. My boss at the time pulled out this big, large sheet of A3 paper and started scribbling with a marker pen and sort of showing me how you could use predictive biomarkers within the safety assessment and toxicology group and predict the outcome of a drug earlier than going right into clinical trials. And that just blew me away. Anyhow, I got the job. I think the most important thing about my time there, I spent sort of 5-6 years there, was that I actually discovered my first mentor. I didn't know he was my mentor. He just provided a lot of guidance to me. And mentorship, sponsorship were not words that were used way back when. So I now obviously recognize that he was my mentor. And what he did say to me was that if I'm passionate about science and I want to continue to be a scientist, that to excel in my career, I would have to go and get a PhD. And so over the following years, I actually had several conversations with him and his team, and he actually ended up providing funding for me to go and do my PhD. So I actually got an industry-funded PhD, and I went to just 30 minutes up the road, which was the University of Cambridge, and ended up pursuing a PhD with Dr. Jules Griffin. and his lab, and I worked on predictive biomarkers. I think what was very different about my path was I was already hitting my early 30s. And so for me to go back to university full time was a major decision. I knew I wanted to go do the studies, but at that time I had many financial commitments. I had a mortgage, and I was working full time. I was paying off my student loan. So I was very comfortable. And the thought of going back to being a student full time, and being at Cambridge, you do have to move in on campus, meant that, you know, I felt nervous about the whole thing. Looking back, it was the best decision I ever made. So I really was very much an independent researcher. As I said, I was a little bit older in my career, and so I spent a lot of time between the university and the actual GSK's labs. So I would run instruments in both the industry on site, and then I would go up to the university and run the instruments there. And I think what really was good for me during that PhD was that I got very technical and knee deep in the technology. And so I'd quickly identified that I definitely wanted to go work for a mass spec vendor to continue that learning curve around technology. So what I would say is here that I had to very early on vocalize what I wanted, and especially during those early days at GSK, asking for the funding. And the first time it was no, the second time it was no, but over the course of a couple of years, that funding did materialize. But I was very persistent. So I would say, you know, be persistent, be vocal about what you want, but I was still not as confident, as vocal as I wanted to be about where I wanted to go. I just knew what my next step was, but not the 2-3 steps after that. So luckily for me, I got a job with Sciex, and I actually took the role with Sciex in Europe, in Germany. I spoke basic German, so that allowed me to go and work in Germany. And then I took extra night classes because I wanted to be integrated into the teams at work, but also the German office. Actually, the colleagues there really became like family for me. So I lived and worked there for about 1.5 years, and very quickly, from 2012 to 2013, I was actually promoted to lead metabolomics scientific applications globally. So what that meant was that I was offered the opportunity to move to California. And again, that was a big life decision. So at the time, you know, living comfortably in London and just traveling all over Europe for my role was actually worked for me and my husband at the time. And we thought, okay, California is a big move. My husband did quit his job for me, and we thought it's a long way to go, but hey, we don't have any ties. We don't have children right now that are in school. So why don't we go? What's the worst that can happen? That we don't like it, we can come back. And that was it. That was where the journey at Sciex began. So the role at Sciex was to lead worldwide metabolomics applications. It was really being at the forefront of the technology for metabolomics. You know, in 5 to 10 years, what are our users that use mass spectrometry or LC and CE mass spectrometry, what will they need, right? So being ahead of the curve, understanding the trends, understanding what their research involved, and working with those thought leaders and publishing with them was a large part of my work. On the right here, you can see Sciex is part of Danaher Corporation. Danaher is a very large organization, and you can see it's broken down into many different platforms. Sciex is part of the life sciences platform, and I've had the opportunity, very lucky, to work with many of the other operating companies such as Leica, Phenomenex, Beckman, amongst many others. And so I spent 5 years doing the scientific work, and the more I got involved in the science, the more I got pulled into the business side and the strategy side, because ultimately being the technical and domain level expert in the particular application meant that often when we were defining strategies and business proposals, I was brought in as the technical lead. So what I started to see was that definitely the business lead was the decision maker, and I was the scientist. So I definitely was the right arm to the left arm, but I was like the backseat driver. So the more I spent time in this role and the more I became more competent, the more I wanted to lead, and the more I found that why can't I go and lead the business? And why can't I define strategies? Because here I am actually helping the teams define them in the first place. So the challenge I hit was, at the time, I wanted to make that move. I was given some advice that I was very technical, and of course I was a scientist. And in order to take a role to lead the business, I would need to go get some hard skills in finance and accounting. And so my manager at the time helped me put in a very aggressive development plan. And I took a course that Danaher offers, and it's accredited by Harvard Business School. And I went and got those hard finance and business skills, because I wanted to go out and speak that language that I was very uncomfortable speaking when it came to speaking to CEOs or lab directors and so forth. People that were leading companies that were potentially our customers. So I wasn't very confident about that. And going and doing the accounting finance course for over 6 months meant that I could start to talk that language. Lo and behold, within 6 months of me taking that course, the business management role opened up, and the position was offered to me by the very manager that helped me execute that development plan and gave me that feedback, which was really, really nice to see. So I was the first non-MBA market business manager at Sciex, and I became responsible for driving the revenue and then the growth of the metabolomics business at Sciex. I had found my dream job. And I was involved in everything from product development, innovation, how to grow those revenue streams, how do we go out and talk to those customers, get that feedback, and make sure that we were evolving our products based on what the customers wanted. And this is where I hit sort of product management responsibilities as well. So not only launching a product, but say, for example, one of the products that I was involved in launching was the lipidizer platform, for anybody who knows about it. The kits and consumables that came with that were manufactured by one of our partners of Antipolar Lipids. Product management meant that I had to make sure that we had the right amount of inventory of kits, that our supply was meeting our demand, right? Being able to accurately forecast how much demand of those kits there would be, that we're not running short in the warehouse, and then we get angry customers. So that was all on the job learning. And I must admit that when I first came into this role, even with the sort of finance, economics, accounting 101 that I had, most of my learning and growth was on the job training. And I must admit, at some points I was out of my depth. It was very new to me. It was very challenging, but at the same time, I found it completely exhilarating. I felt that I needed to be challenged, and the role helped me realize, and if I tie it back to, worth, that I constantly need to be challenged as a person. And that's me personally, right? And I'm not saying that you have to be that way, but I found that I do need to be challenged, and this role challenged me. And being uncomfortable meant that I could really try and learn where my gaps were very quickly, and that would help me grow. So I helped the business grow double digits over my tenure in the role, and I was in that role for about 3 years. However, I hit my next challenge during this role, a challenge, but also a gift and a blessing. I became pregnant with my first child. And I had always wanted to have a family. And the role here particularly was a global role. It had international travel involved, and I was traveling internationally every other month. So when we had our son, I had to make a decision that I wanted to be home. I wanted to be home for my family. I didn't want to travel internationally anymore and be away from home. So I had some very interesting conversations with senior leadership at the company at the time. And I remember one conversation with a VP who said to me, his exact words were, "What do you want to do, Bal? Where do you want to go?" And bear in mind, I've already been in the company at this point 5 or 6 years, and I had no response for him. What I really liked about him, though, was that he was the person that became a mentor to me, and I've had women mentors in my career, but I've equally, if not more, I've had male mentors. And he was the one that helped me really understand where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, and what this sort of 5-year plan looks like. And he helped me understand that I don't have to have a role where I need to travel internationally, that there are other roles available at Sciex where I can continue to pursue my career ambitions, but I can equally be, have my family and work-life balance. And that took me to my current role that I'm in today. So I took this role on formally in 2020, but I was already doing this role in 2019. And it's a regional role. It means it does not have international travel involved. It has just very local travel involved. And it took me into the marketing organization. So I'd gone from product management to business management to now marketing and market development, which is really trying to find areas of growth for the business. And it also took me a layer deeper in working with our sales force. So when you're sort of defining strategy and you're leading the business, you're really that sort of 50,000 foot overview, where's the business going? And then when you come and work in a regional team, like I'm responsible for today, the Americas region, which is North America, Latin America, and Canada, I could really focus and work with our field-based colleagues. And one of our sales colleagues is on the call today, Amy Knight, and I work a lot with her. And I really enjoy working with them because they're on the ground, they hear what our customers are saying, what our customers need, and they bring all that information back in. And then I'm in the team that's very reactive, and we work directly with them to make sure they get what they need to go out and be successful in their roles. So very, very interesting role, and has allowed me, like I said, that work-life balance and really hone in on my scientific skills. So as you can see, I've used my scientific competencies and applied them and broadened my skills in many other areas of the business at Sciex, and I'm very fortunate to have had that experience. And just my last sort of 2 slides here before we open up, I guess, for a discussion. Outside of Sciex, I actually have a number of different community engagements. One of them is internally at Sciex, where I talked about I serve on the as a D&I change agent. What it means is that there are many different D&I initiatives at Sciex and Danaher as a whole. However, what I realized when I had my son was that there really wasn't a way of following women who had announced their pregnancies, or parents in general, that they were expecting a child, following them as they went out on their parental or maternity leave, and then bringing them back in and integrating them back in to work, given their new normal at home. So that program was initiated last year, and we rolled it out across Sciex more recently, and we plan to roll it out, fingers crossed, across Danaher. So I'm very proud of that. And outside of Sciex, as originally was mentioned, I recently was appointed treasurer as part of the board of directors at the Metabolomics Society. It's a complete honor for me because I'm an ex-EMN alumni. I served on the early members network several years ago. And there were 2 reasons. One was I wanted to give back to the community. I'd taken from the scientific community, I'd got mentorship from various different scientific leaders in the field. But in turn, I wanted to now give back, given that I had so much experience. At the same time, remember I talked about those accounting skills that I had gained. I felt that I really wanted more, deepen my knowledge of finance, and what the treasurer role allows me to do is actually have full P&L responsibilities. So I actually am responsible for the balance sheets. I track the ingoings, outgoings of the society, and then I have to report that monthly to the board and take any questions that they have. And I'm responsible for setting the society budget annually and working with the conference committee to set the conference budget. And again, I was thrown in at the deep end, and it was very challenging. It was uncomfortable at points, but again, I it's very exhilarating for me. So it's almost like this, pain, love-hate relationship, but it really helps drive me. So I really enjoy that. And I've had some really good mentors from past treasurers, such as Nicole Riesdorf and Oliver Feen, to really help me get up to speed with my role. I serve on the metabolomics working group as part of the Association for Biomolecular Resource Facilities. It's really a genomics proteomics community, but more and more there's metabolomics appearing and integrating the omicses. And so I've been involved with the working group to make sure that we organize workshops, conduct surveys, and how do we bring that knowledge and disseminate it within the ABRF. And then I also serve on the MQAC committee, which is a community-driven consortium which really pushes best practices for QA/QC in the field of metabolomics. And I'm also a member of the subgroup of the reference testing materials working group. And we, again, disseminate best practices, we get that information out, we educate the community, and we run workshops, and we co-author manuscripts. So that's a lot of writing and just networking outside of my day job. But again, it's somehow tied back into the same field I'm in. And lastly, by no means least, I love to give back, and I mentor early career scientists. And so I'm always open to forums like this where I can come back and talk to women like yourselves, aspiring scientists. Where do you want to go? Have you thought about what you want to do? And I ask those same questions that I was asked when I was, early on in my career, and have those discussions with you all. For me, when I think back, how I tie it back to worth and self-worth is that for me, it's really important, to challenge myself, as I've said before, but also I like to build skills that are outside of my core, right? So I'm a scientist by training, but I love to learn new things, and it's still connected to me being a scientist, right? I'm never going to lose that title, and never going to lose that training, but it just allows me to build my networks, broaden my networks, and also open new doors. Who knows where this is going to take me next, right? But again, just examples of where you can go and what is possible if you're that way inclined. And my last, I think it's my last slide. Yeah. What are the future opportunities? Like where could I go? Where could anybody with this type of a career path go? Well, there's growth within the organization. So I mentioned that I'm part of, Sciex is part of Danaher. I can grow within Danaher's organization. I could take the skills I've learned and built over the last 20 years or so, go and work for a startup company. It's small, it's scrappy, you can wear multiple hats. And I have, many of those different roles that I've been across. I can probably help support and grow teams. Can go and work for a VC or a private investment firm, right? At the end of the day, when I was doing my business management role, I had to, a lot of the time, build business proposals, build financial models. How are we going to deliver that growth? And here you can vet out those companies, and that might be a path to take. I could broaden my marketing career, whether it be in the scientific industry or really, honestly, any industry. And whether that's in a B2B environment or a direct-to-consumer environment. I could start my own company, right? Many people have done that. I know many people in the field have gone out and spun out their own companies. And I could even go back to global business travel if I wanted. But really, the take-home point here is that being a scientist, training as a scientist, and ultimately being a woman does not hinder your opportunities. I've been fortunate enough that I haven't hit any of those walls, but I talked about some of my challenges and some of the barriers, but how I overcame them. And the more I've moved on in my career, I've become more vocal and much more confident in saying what I want to do, and where I want to go. And culturally, my background, I sort of presented myself. I mentioned I'm of Indian origin, and as a woman, I'm supposed to be shy and quiet. It's just it's the very nature of our culture, and being very direct and being very open and outspoken is something that's not really seen. And my mother was my role model, but she's a very outspoken woman. And that in turn led me to be the way I was. And I think that often in my culture, the thought is that if you put your head down, you work hard, you know, you'll get to where you need to be. But often I think you need to be able to vocalize what you want, where you want to go, and show that passion and that drive. And I would say, you know, more so in corporate America, from my experience, than ever, than anywhere else. And just to finish, this is when I was building this presentation, I found a PowerPoint presentation where I had to deliver a similar talk at the Metabolomics Society meeting in 2015. So yeah, about 6 years ago. I found this slide, and I was a scientist at the time, and they'd asked me to give a similar talk, and they asked me, where could my scientific role lead me? And at the time, I just threw a bunch of bullets on a slide and said, these are all the different areas that I could get into. And the red box for me was really interesting to highlight that in the 6 years since I've been a scientist, that I've taken roles in at least four of the areas that I'd outlined just without thinking about it. And I continue to work with the teams that are in the 3 bullets below. But I think the possibilities are endless. And I'm just very fortunate and very lucky and very happy to have been able to really broaden my experience across these different functions within the organization. With that, I want to say thank you. I think I went a little bit over time, I'm sorry, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. We have a few questions in the chat already. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, we can kind of go with like this, the order that's in the chat. So Krishnatej, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
And I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves. I talked to, or I chatted with them earlier, so you might have to read that one.
Okay, not a problem. So they have a 2-part question. The first is, as a trained scientist, how did you overcome any slight hesitation in training for a non-scientific role? And the second question is, in industry, is transition like yours essential to become a left hand and not remain the right hand?
Yeah, so for the, wow. So for the first part, I'm glad you asked that question because I didn't really talk about it. I had panic attacks when I thought I'm leaving the bench behind and I'm now going on to do this business role. And the scientific bench was all I knew for all of that part of my career. And whilst I wanted to be challenged and I wanted to lead and make those business decisions, I was really having a hard time accepting that I had to leave and put my pipette down and move on. But ultimately, I had to make that decision. It was tough, but I knew that if I didn't throw myself into something new and didn't throw myself out of my comfort zone, that I wouldn't, you know, continue to challenge myself. And that's not to say that you can't challenge yourself as a scientist. You absolutely can. I think that, you know, the organization that I am in allows me to see many different functions of the company, and having that visibility, you know, drives a little bit of what you want to do, where you want to go. So yeah, I was very nervous about it. I think the second piece that really made me nervous was, how's the community going to see me, right? Are they still going to be very accepting of me as a scientist? Can I still be involved in, you know, some of these scientific organizations? Can I be involved in some of these scientific and community-driven consortia? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes, right? That again at the time wasn't very apparent to me because I didn't have anybody to identify with that had made a similar path. And so that's the reason that I love talking at these type of events, because I want that visibility to be there, that, you know, hey, if I can do it, anybody can do it. The second part of the question, remind me, it was is industry.
In industry, is
needed.
transition like yours essential to become a left hand and not remain as the right?
Yeah, so like I said, being the lead metabolomics scientist meant that I was at the top of my game in terms of science at the company. So that was great. I always had a say in the business decision. The business team would always take my input because at the end of the day, I'm the technical expert, right? So I can provide that technical expertise that they didn't have. However, I got to say that when I took the business role, I actually excelled versus my colleagues because I had the technical background. I could make decisions very, very quickly because I could go from that 50,000 foot strategic roadmap, the vision, and I could have that granular discussion at the technical level with the scientists at the bench. And that I really, really enjoyed. So I don't think it's necessary. It really depends on what you want to do. And some people are very comfortable being, that lead scientist for 10, 20 years. That's fine. Just for me, I wanted to be challenged in a different direction, and if it didn't work, I had the science to come back to, and I would always continue that scientific career, but it's not necessary.
This is a question I have, kind of building off what you just said. Because you had that technical background, it helped you in making some of those decisions. But how did those decisions? How were they received at the other end of the other business managers or like the VP or other people like in the organization who don't necessarily have that technical? And you also mentioned that you were the first non-MBA in that business role. So like, how did you kind of break that barrier and have that open conversation with them?
Yeah. So yeah, right off the back, as I said, when I first sort of threw it out there that that's where I wanted to, that's the direction I wanted to go, the immediate feedback was, oh, but you're too technical, Val. Well, I'm a scientist. I have to be technical. That's exactly what I'm here for. So my response was, what do I need to do? Where are my gaps? And what do I need to do to make sure that, when such a position does open up, that I'm ready for it? And so, like I said during the presentation, I built that plan with my manager to make sure that I was ready to do so. And again, that's my boss. And then, the VP, the senior leaders, they always will see you as technical. It's really hard, right? Even though the last 6-7 years I've been away from the bench, it's really hard to get away from the fact that I was always that technical expert. People still today come back around and ask me those technical questions, right? And it's not that I don't like it, it's that I want to grow in a certain area. So I always push back to our scientists and I say, that's a great question. This person will help you answer it. Because if I keep doing that, I'm not going to diversify myself, right? And broaden myself into an area that I want to grow. I've got a passion for marketing. That's where I want to grow. It's not to say that I don't ever want to be affiliated with metabolomics again. Quite honestly, it's the opposite. But if you really want to, shape the way a career path, sometimes you have to let go of certain things in order to move forward.
I was going to ask Jenny if she wanted to unmute, but it looks like she just walked away. Does anyone else have a question they would like to unmute? Feel free to unmute and ask.
I have a question, but it's a bit loud here with the rain. Is the background okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally am with you in you need to be challenged, right? You need to be challenged to see some gaps for learning but how do you balance being overcommitted and being understimulated? Because it's easy to get dragged into all sorts of stuff, right? When you're so enthusiastic.
Yeah, so I have run into those challenges myself. I've overcommitted. And then when I've recognized I've overcommitted, and there was a period a few years ago where I really did hit that wall, then I took a step back and I said, okay, I need to slow down. I need to slow down because I've overcommitted. Now I'm not delivering on a commitment that I made to somebody outside of my work responsibilities. And yeah, sometimes I do have to slow myself down. I am so used to running at that 100 miles an hour that now what I do is I just prioritize. So if I see that I have the bandwidth to deliver something, I will. And actually, it brings me back around to this this presentation. When Kiati first contacted me, I think it was day one of my maternity leave. And I thought, am I going to be able to do this? And I was basing it off my son, who was just a pure angel. You could feed him, put him down 4 hours, he was out. I was writing book chapters and manuscripts. And my daughter is the complete opposite. You have to hold her all day. So when she mentioned, can I do the talk in 4 weeks' time? I thought, yeah, it'll be fine. The nearer I got to it, and I just started getting really nervous. I thought, oh, what am I going to do? So I'm really fortunate. I have a very supportive family. As I said, my husband's taken over for this evening and really supported me in getting the talk together. He did my dry runs with me. And yeah, he's been fantastic. But yeah, overcommitment is a challenge I've run into. And then, you know, I don't want that feeling again of overcommitting, because I felt really guilty and really bad that I couldn't deliver to somebody. And I don't want that feeling again. So I slow down and I prioritize.
Jenny, did you want to unmute and ask?
Yeah, sure, Bal. It's wonderful talk. Thanks for doing this. It's wonderful. So I have kind of I have a question that, you know, there's been just really recently a big push in proteomics, a lot of money going into startup companies, and I shouldn't even call them startup. They've been around for a long time, hundreds of millions of dollars going into proteomics in some of these companies. So impact in metabolomics, do you see that, you know, drifting down to some of, you know, large scale money going into metabolomics? And also, do you see if that's going to change or improve opportunities for individuals who have this combination that you have, right, which is the science and the business marketing areas?
Yeah, in fact, Jenny, that's a great question. So it's happening already today. There are many startups that are metabolomics based, right? So I can name a number of them. There's Agios, for example, that is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Rios Medicine, to name a few. Alaris is a precision medicine based metabolomic startup that's based on NMR, and they're venturing out into the world of mass spec. So a lot of startups that have got VC funded or private funding, angel investors. And you're right, proteomics is really hot right now. And a lot of IPOs have been happening. So they've been publicly traded companies, and they're doing very well for themselves. And so, yeah, it's already happening in metabolomics, and it's providing a lot of opportunity, because it means not just on the business and the product side, on the scientific side, we've had many scientists at Sciex poached off into startup companies, because they're now, and more recently, yeah, more recently, somebody I hired, he got taken away and he's leading metabolomics efforts at Impossible Foods, and Impossible Foods looks like it's about to IPO. And so yeah, they're doing a lot of lipidomics there, because they're looking at plant-based proteins, and the Impossible Burger is obviously a plant-based protein, and but they do a lot of lipidomics profiling. And so yeah, I think opportunity for scientists is really, really great, and there are pockets of that, right? So for example, in the United States, that's in the sort of Silicon Valley area, Cambridge, Massachusetts, in on the East Coast. But even here, I'm in Denver, Colorado, and there's a lot of startup companies. There's the proteomics-based company. What are they called? Forget the name. But they're headquartered here. There's I think the reason for the funding is that investors, everyday people, let's call them, have started to understand genomics and DNA, and they understand the potential that genomics had and maybe is missed out on. And that's why that's filtered down to proteomics and now metabolomics. So there was a lot of funding going into genomics-based startups that is now that money is being pumped into proteomics-based companies. Right? If you look at Seer Bio, for example, the leadership team is all from Illumina, right? So all the next-gen based sequencing based leadership team. So yeah, I think we're there today, and I think it will continue.
Will it change the business model of the mass spec vendors from going from selling the instruments to selling
Well, we sell
reagents?
to,
I mean,
sell,
Sciex is well positioned, so sorry.
yeah, I mean, we sell to many of them today, many startup companies, and I would say not just startup, but the synthetic biology space with respect to omics is a rapidly growing area. And that is where we're finding a lot of customers are coming to Sciex.
Cool.
For mass spectrometry based techniques, because they're metabolic, they're doing metabolic engineering, strain optimization, they're doing these large fermentation based experiments, and they want to look at metabolic activity and flux and so forth and turnover. And so that then takes them right back to, okay, well, we need analytical techniques to do this, and we need the scientists. So again, a lot of scientists have left the company to go and work for those types of companies like Amaris and Zymergen and Ginkgo, for example.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So Bal, I kind of have a two-part question too for you. So you've had such an amazing career so far. What would be your ideal place in 5 years? Like, you've went so many different ways. Like, where would you love to be in 5 years? And then my other part is, knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell Bal, who was like shy and having panic attacks and stuff, that would help her get through that? Because I think that would be great advice for some of these people.
Yeah, I think I'll take the second part first. I wish I could have been more vocal. I think I hid my career aspirations too much. I didn't know how to articulate them. Again, some of that is cultural because of the way I was brought up and my background. Even though I'm British and first generation, my parents were very, very traditional, right? So, a woman had her place, a man had his place. So, and that upbringing sort of ultimately bled into the way I held myself in my career. So if Bal now could tell Bal something 10 years ago, it would be to just be much more confident and open about where it is that you want to go, what it is that you want to do. Even if you can't see 5 years out, the immediate step, right? I found it really hard to ask for that because I felt I shouldn't ask for it. And now we're in a very different place where I think, it's a given that you need to ask. So that's the advice I would give myself, and just to be more confident, be vocal. I think you can do that by finding your mentors early on. And so there's people that offer you guidance, latch onto them, ask them to meet with them regularly and so forth. And then, where do I see myself in 5 years? Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky question. So I love working for the company I'm at. I actually love being part of the Danaher family, because the possibilities are endless. I could go work for, Leica or Phenomenex. I could go, work with column chemistries, or I could go and work with microscopes, right? I could completely go outside of the mass spec space. So I could really, try and one of my aspirations is to get to become, a senior leader in the organization. I think that's important for two reasons. One, it fuels my sort of, career ambitions to lead and be a people leader, and take the company and define strategies and continuing to grow the business. But I think the second point, and most importantly, is to have somebody to identify to, right? So even up until now in my career, it's been very hard to have somebody on the leadership team that I identify with, because still the field is very male dominated, and it's not very diverse. We are diverse as a scientific community, but those leadership positions are not held by diverse personas. So that has been very hard for me as I've gone through my career, because it's hard to make that connection that, hey, if she can do it, I can do it, right? And our president, or actually I would say our previous president, who just transitioned the last week, she talked here at FeMS, and she was a woman, and she had children, and she'd had this amazing career. And I remember just having a really deep conversation with her about how she got there and what steps she took, and she offered advice to me too. So That's really, really important. So one part is to grow within the current organization and be part of the senior leadership team. But the other side of me is like, could I do something more with metabolomics, and could I go out and spin out a company, right? I've been involved with so many people who have spun out their own companies and have been at early phase and been an advisor and so forth, that, you know, am I leaving something on the table by not going out and doing something there? So yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah. Binny, do you have a question? Did I pronounce your name right? And you're on mute, by the way.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I had a very general question. So we get to see a lot of people from, you know, academic background transition into industry and into a technical role, eventually migrating into a leadership role, more focusing on the, you know, the business and the kind of roles which you do. So I was always, you know, amused that, is that transition really mandatory to progress in the career when you switch over to industry, or can you restrict yourself to the technical field and still advance in the career?
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely, you can advance in science. I think there's no doubt about it. I mean, there are people here on the call who are, you know, just driving the field forward, right? So absolutely, I think. And then, you know, if you think about it as a scientist, pardon me, if you're, for example, a core lab director, at the end of the day, you're a scientist, but you're almost running a fee-for-service business. And there's a lot of business tools that you can pick up there. You don't have to go down the business route, or the path that I showed. That's just a path that my life took me down. A bit unusual, but yeah, you can excel and be a leader and drive strategy and vision as a scientist. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about it. And you can do that even if you transition. If you stay in academia, you can do it. And even if you move from academia to industry as a scientist, you can do it there. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I don't want to paint the picture that that's not possible.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question if I can ask. Am I audible?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Baljit. This is Krishnatej. It was a great talk. It was interesting.
Thank you.
My question is, you have been associated with Sciex for quite a long time. At any point, did you think of looking beyond Sciex? And my second question is, how would you see in an industry and as in a leadership role, how would you see moving across companies or moving across roles outside your, I mean, that's also in a way challenging yourself to not stick to one role or one organization. And how would that affect growth, professional growth?
Yeah, so you're right. I have been associated with Sciex a long time. And that can be a good thing, but at the same time, it can be a not so good thing, right? Because then you're just seen as that person. So one thing I will say is that for now, you know, Sciex has given me everything I needed, and where I needed to be challenged, when I wanted to grow, whatever I wanted to do, even from not being able to, you know, confidently vocalize it to now being able to confidently speak out about what I want to do, where I want to go. And I got asked that question just this morning. What is it that you want to do? And so, you know, they've given me everything I needed so far, right? Now, that's not to say that I couldn't move across organizations, and I'd be lying if I told you that I hadn't been given opportunities to move outside of Sciex to either our competitors or to startups. So I have been offered roles. I just guess that I made decisions where I was at my career with my my family situation to stay where I was. Not because I'm comfortable, just when I looked at it, sort of where I was in terms of my development path, into, you know, sort of building out the career, but also, you know, whether I was happy or not with what I was doing. And, you know, I have many different, year on year, we have many different performance objectives, and I was happy doing what I was doing. How would my growth be affected if I moved to other organizations? So if I was to move across other operating companies within Danaher, I would get far more visibility across other technologies. So I'm currently working in a mass spec organization, but if I move to Leica, it would be microscopes, right? But it's still life science industry at the end of the day, right? You're still working with scientists in labs, and so forth. If you come out, and if I talk about more recently, was offered a role at a startup company leading their marketing organization, the growth would be exponential because the company's 30 people. If the company's 30 people, you have to go in, and you don't, even though you are leading the marketing organization, you are a team of one, right? Meaning that you are doing the marketing, you're driving the vision and building out the strategy, and then you're recruiting and building that team out. So I'm fortunate that my husband works, and he's worked for 3 or 4 different startups now. And I've seen it's painful because you come in as the subject matter expert, you've got 20 years of experience behind you, but you go right back down and you have to do everything administrative, you know, and in these large corporations, you have people that you have the admin team, you have this team, you hand off this to this team. And so the growth really in moving out to organizations, if you move to a larger organization, it's more structured, right? So there's process. If you move out to an early stage startup or a smaller company, then you're looking to wear multiple hats, and you have to really roll your sleeves up and dig in. But the growth really is that you see it from beginning to end, that you're growing out those teams, and those teams have exponential growth, right? Those startups achieve growth in a year and become, as Jenny was just saying about these proteomic startups, they're becoming billion-dollar companies in a year, which is what large organizations like Sciex are taking 10, 20 years to do, right? So that's where the growth is, not just growth financially, but growth in your career, in what you learn. You learn in 1 year or 6 months what it would take, 6 years, for example, in a larger, more structured organization that has process. And, frankly speaking, more red tape, right? You have to get around, follow those processes and get things signed off, checks and balances that need to be done, especially when you're an ISO accredited company, right? There are certain procedures that you have to follow, as opposed to some of these more smaller companies. And if we talk about startup world, it's very, very different, right? So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, we are 15 minutes over, and I have a feeling this could go on for another 3 hours if we wanted to. But I will try to be respectful of everyone's time. So I want to once again say thank you again for agreeing and doing this session. For someone who's in a very early career stage, this was really helpful, and it was very informative for me. So,
thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the questions.
Erin, did you have any final comments?
Yeah, great job, Val. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody give Kiati a big hand for organizing. She did amazing today. So great job, Kiati. And we'd love to have you back to organize more. So does anybody have any announcements? I've seen a few things going up on the chat where we have the underrepresented scientists directory. So if you're not a member of that, please sign up. It's going to be a great directory to give people where if they're organizing conferences, special issues, different things, and they're looking for women or other minorities in the area, they can check that out and see if they've forgotten anybody or have other people to include. So please check that out. Kaylee added the Vimeo for the previous FeMS we had with the Sciex president that Bal was talking about. If anybody wants to copy that link and see that, that was a really amazing one. That was actually one of our first ones. I think she was either the first person or the second person to speak at FeMS last year. So it was a great meeting. And then Bal just put her contact info in the chat. So anybody that wants to contact her on Twitter or in her email. Any job announcements though, we had some great job announcements last week, and they actually, people applied, and I know that they've got interviews already. So I thought that was really cool. I really love the networking that's capable with FeMS. So if you guys have any job or announcements, please unmute or stick those in the chat too. And I know that some of them have actually, there was a recent one that just went on the FeMS website board. So please make sure to check out our job board too. There's been some really nice job postings lately for different postdoc and possibly industry positions. But yeah, if not, then thank you all so much for joining. A huge round of applause for Bal and Kayati. And we're looking forward to next month. We're going to do a special on interviews and negotiations. So we're working on getting panels together for both of those, getting people ready for the job market in the fall through training through the summer. So everybody take care, and we hope to see you next month. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.